Vaccinations are a contentious debate among parents across the globe. Those in favour thereof will tell you the importance of vaccinations and that it is utterly essential to protect your child from potential fatal diseases and viruses. But on the other hand, activists against vaccinations argue that they are filled with toxins and that they cannot be trusted. So let's try and give both sides of the story enough chance this morning. And we joined in studio by Dr Melinda Suchard. She's the head of the Centre for Vaccines and Immunology at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, or NICD. Good to have you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now on the line, unfortunately we were hoping to get her via Skype, but I think it's better to get her on the line at this stage. It's a much more stable call that we've made in Cape Town. Mary-Ann Shearer, she's a natural health practitioner and is pretty much on the side of anti-vaccinations. Good to have you, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's begin with Melinda here in studio. So the World Health Organization has listed vaccine hesitancy as one of the 10 global health threats in 2019. Talk to us about this, and I suppose maybe to begin by giving a definition of vaccine hesitancy.
So vaccine hesitancy is when people are unsure about the information that is out there and unsure about whether they wish to take vaccines, as opposed to vaccine refusal, which is something different, which is someone who's really decided that they are against vaccines. And what we see is with the rise of internet and social media, that more and more people are getting access to misinformation and becoming confused by the different sources of information available on things like social media, and are choosing, we see more people choosing not to vaccinate, which is a terrible pity considering that we are seeing now these infectious diseases resurging and coming back.
Yeah.
Europe last year had the most number of measles deaths it's had since many years, and it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy that people would choose not to use a safe, effective vaccine that can prevent a child dying.
Okay, so let's, I suppose, get the other side of the story now. So we hear why it is important to vaccinate, but let's go to Mary-Ann now and ask you, Mary-Ann, you're a natural health practitioner and you're against child vaccinations. Why?
Well, it started with my own children many years ago. I have 3 daughters. The youngest is now 33. And I had vaccinated the first 2 at 5 and at 18 months. And I really, as a mom and speaking to mothers, taking a child for a vaccination, that scream will never leave you. It will never, ever leave you. The way they scream is if you are actually killing them and you're holding them while they're being vaccinated. And I had to find answers, because I also found that when my children were vaccinated, they'd get quite sick. They'd get a fever. They'd be unsettled. They would be crying for no reason. They would refuse food for up to 3 or 5 days. And whenever I spoke to other mothers, it was the same problem. We felt as if we were abusing our children, because what kind of effect does that... And this is an emotional response. Granted, it's a very emotional response, but there are thousands of mothers around who freak out when they take their kids to be vaccinated. Yeah. So I investigated, and I was quite shocked at the information I got. My first stop was Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, a pediatrician, who wrote a book called How to Raise Healthy Children in Spite of Your Doctor. And, he basically says, to sum it up, are we trading measles and mumps for leukemia? Because he says childhood diseases, for a child to get measles or mumps when they're young, is not an issue at all. It's mild. They get mildly sick. They have a bit of a fever. You keep them quiet. It's fine. But most vaccines only protect for 7 to 10 years, and then your child ends up getting measles and mumps at a later stage, which is exactly what happened to my daughter, my oldest daughter, Melissa. Yeah. She was vaccinated against mumps, and she got mumps at 13, and then she was really sick. Fortunately, with a healthy diet, she recovered pretty quickly. But Dr. Robert Mendelsohn and people like Dr. Michael Dye, these are medical professionals, state outrightly that a healthy diet is the best protection. It helps the immune system function efficiently, whereas vaccinations actually suppress immune function in the long term. And some of the side effects that are associated with just something like measles is encephalitis, subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is hardening of the brain, which is usually fatal, ataxia, the inability to coordinate muscle movements, mental retardation, autism, aseptic meningitis, seizures, hemipatesis, which is paralysis of the side of the body. There's a long list of side effects, and I don't want to bore everybody to tears. But to just say that you're picking, this is not from the internet. This is research done through medical sources.
Okay. So let's bring... Let me bring. There's a lot that's been said from your side. I'd like to bring Dr. Suchard into this. But if we look at some of the things that have been mentioned now, and some of the repercussions that come from vaccinations that are being alluded to, what is your response to that?
Well, the first thing is to reassure everybody that vaccines are more closely studied for safety than any other medication. The medical fraternity is well aware that we give vaccines to healthy children, and therefore their bar set for safety is much higher than for any other pill in your cupboard. So vaccine safety is on the top of everybody's priority list, and every vaccine is fully investigated for safety before it is licensed by a regulatory body. So vaccines are the best way we can help our children to prevent them from infectious diseases.
So something that Mary-Ann was saying was that, okay, so you protect the child from measles, which is very easily treatable. However, there are so many other side effects that could come with having vaccination. She went through a whole long list. I interrupted her at that stage just so I can get your view on it as well.
Okay, so I have to interrupt you even at the first statement you made about measles being easily treatable is not really true. Measles is very unpredictable. Measles can be fatal, and it can be fatal, it's more often fatal in malnourished children, but it can also be fatal in healthy first world kind of children. And we've seen cases in South Africa of children very well nourished from very affluent societies who've ended up in ICU with encephalitis after catching natural measles, for example, as teenagers. So it's not true that measles is easily treatable. Measles is not treatable. Measles is only preventable, and it's preventable through vaccination.
Yeah. In terms of long-term repercussions, I mean, let's bring into it. I heard Mary-Ann talk to the fact of autism, and I know this has been around for a while. It's obviously been disputed now. Having the MMR vaccination can lead to autism, and that was struck off the medical roll, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
the person who came up with it.
That was one paper that was retracted, and the author was, as you say, struck off the medical roll. There were some financial incentives involved in the publication of that paper, and interestingly, even that original myth was around the MMR vaccine, the combination measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. South Africa, in our government schedule, actually only uses measles vaccine alone. We are not even using the MMR vaccine. These are just, people who are strongly anti-vaccination will find any reason they can think of to put forward as a reason why they're against vaccination. But the reasons vary as you find the scientific evidence to argue with one point, they will immediately switch to a different point.
Mary-Ann, let's bring you back into the conversation now, because I think we've kind of spoken to everything that you've mentioned. You know, I was reading a little bit offline in terms of what's happening in the States at the moment, and there's also this movement around measles. There was a major outbreak of measles within the United States. I'm just using that as an example. I know there's been an outbreak around the world. There was a school that ruled that no kid could come to that school if they had not been vaccinated against measles. And children under the age of 18 in certain states are now allowed to go and get vaccinations, even if it's against their parents' will. I mean, what do you make of stories that are doing the rounds now where the decision is being left to the child as to whether they want to be vaccinated or not?
Well, you know, what was mentioned earlier on is financial issues from people who are trying to prevent people or speaking out against vaccinations. There's absolutely no financial gain. And why I'm mentioning the financial side, because finances and fear are the two things that are used to manipulate us to a place where we will be vaccinated. Because there is a huge... In South Africa, you're talking hundreds of millions of rands every year is taken from taxpayers' contributions and used to pay the pharmaceutical companies to give people free vaccinations. It's big money, okay? The other thing is the fear that is used. There is nothing that I can gain or anybody else can gain from warning people of the side effects of vaccination. I don't have an alternative vaccination. I'm not offering any product that will protect the children. The amazing thing is that if you get measles, it may not be preventable, but if you get it and you are healthy, you get it very mildly, and you have immunity for life. vaccination does not give you immunity for life. It can delay you getting it at a later stage. And if you get mumps as an adult, especially if you're a man, it causes terrible side effects, okay? So there's no guarantee. The health department, and I phone them regularly when I can get through to them, which is difficult these days, and I've asked them, is it compulsory to be vaccinated? They said no, but they highly recommend it. Okay. Can you give me a written guarantee that I will not get this disease and my child will not get the disease? They cannot give me a written guarantee. They said the only thing is that it'll be a milder form of that disease. I said, can you give me a written guarantee that it'll be milder? They can't give me that either. So, the things aren't tying up. And as I said to you, to my mind, the biggest motivator is finances and fear that makes people vaccinate. If they knew the other side of it and they knew that feeding a child a healthy diet would protect them, and that if they got mumps and recovered from it, they would be immune for life, which you are not when you vaccinate.
It's quite
immunity for life.
It's quite interesting that you say that. We've just read an article now as well from a woman who was brought up exactly how you're saying. She was never vaccinated against a thing, but instead was brought up on a very, very healthy diet by her mother, who was very, very health conscious and didn't believe in vaccinations, as you yourself do as well. Her article in response to all of this was she was sick all the time, even though she lived on this healthy diet and, was sort of living by her mother's standards. And yet, what she has done is the complete opposite for her children, has ensured that they are vaccinated because she doesn't want them to go through what she went through. It's quite amazing.
Is this a genuine person?
I can send you the article. It's a very genuine person. But then again, as you know, that this is a divided conversation. Nobody obviously is right here. So I suppose people you have the ability to make the decision yourself, and you've decided not to vaccinate your children. May I ask you, are they well? Are they healthy?
I have 3 adult children that are very healthy. They were partially vaccinated, and I have 5 grandchildren that are exceptionally healthy. They, unlike me, who was vaccinated, and my children have no allergies, no hay fever. We haven't had a doctor's bill due to ill health in 30 years.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, this is not... I've written several books on health, and one of them, Healthy Kids, I talk about it, and a lot of people have followed the no vaccination route. And found the same thing. Their children are healthy, exceptionally healthy, no allergies, no hay fever, no learning disabilities, no concentration problems, no ABD, none of those problems.
Very interesting.
When the kids aren't vaccinated.
All right, let me give this to Dr. Suchard to wrap as well. Your wrapping point.
The warning to the public listening here is not to make decisions based on one personal story, right? There are many personal stories, and we're hearing some now. Her children are healthy. I could also tell you stories about my vaccinated children who are also very healthy. The issue is not to make decisions based on personal stories, but rather on evidence. And evidence, the medical evidence, is compiled over decades and decades of evidence through almost every country in the world, who all vaccinate millions of children every year, and who are fully confident in the safety and efficacy of our current vaccines to prevent diseases. So saying that children are healthy at this point in time, they're only healthy until the disease comes to town. And at that point, that is when they might have a problem.
Ladies, this is a fascinating conversation, and one that we have to warn our viewers is something you need to research and you need to decide in a very educated manner. But we thank my guests for being with us. Dr. Melinda Suchard, who's in the studio with us. She's the head of the Center for Vaccines and Immunology at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. And of course, Mary-Ann Shearer. She's a natural health practitioner talking to us about not vaccinating your children and the benefits thereof. So we have to leave it there, unfortunately, and a quick goodbye after this.